You stayed longer than you should. You gave more than you had. You excused things you knew were wrong. And when someone finally asked you why, the only answer you could find was, I don't know. I just couldn't leave. That is not a weakness. That is not stupidity. That is a pattern with a name. And today we're going to give that name. So it's codependency is the invisible force behind why brilliant, caring, strong women end up in marriages they can't leave. It's the reason you put everyone else first and lose yourself in the process. It's the reason your anger scares you. It's the reason you're afraid. And even now, that you're going to do it again. If you've ever asked yourself, why did I stay? This episode is for you. Welcome back. Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich, and I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. I've been doing technical problems all day, so excuse me. Hey, I am excited about this topic that we're going to be talking about today is codependency. I remember, it's funny, when I was reading and preparing for this show, I was thinking about the book when I was a teenager. I should have read it every month or every year at least. It's called Codependent No More. I remember, it's an old book, but I remember when I was doing a lot of coaching, I ended up recommending that book to a lot of people. And even as a teenager, I recognized some of those symptoms within myself. And you would think that it would have stopped me from being able to get into 2 marriages that I was quite codependent in. So this is a really important conversation if you do find yourself, and I want to also mention that this isn't just men or women that get into these kind of relationships, it's also men. And so, we might be talking about women necessarily, but there's plenty of men out there that fall prey to this codependency, which is what you really, really feel like somebody else's problems is your problems. And that has taken years for me to recognize and to be able to see that is not the case. So anyway, so today's going to be a really interesting, so make sure you tune in, make sure you like and subscribe, send this to people that you think might be useful for them in helping them see the signs and be able to get out of the pattern. So there's a question I hear from women in this community more than almost anything other than this. Now is the question is about not so much about attorneys, not a question about money, a quieter question. One they're almost afraid to say out loud is, why did I stay so long? Today's guest has built her entire career around answering that question, and she has answered it for more than 3 million people. Michelle Farris is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified anger management specialist, and a recovery counselor based in San Jose, California, which is where I grew up. She is a founder of Counseling Recovery, where she specializes in 2 of the most undiagnosed forces that drive women into and keep them inside toxic relationships: codependency and unresolved anger. Her YouTube channel has reached over 3 million views through practical, compassionate, no-nonsense guidance on how to break free from the one-sided relationships, heal codependent patterns, and build something better, starting with yourself. She has written multiple ebooks and courses, offers live Zoom classes and master classes on boundaries, and has become one of the most trusted voices online for women who are finally ready to stop losing themselves in relationships that were never built for them to win. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Michelle. See, we've got all these technical issues.
It's the way of the new world, right? We all get those glitches.
I know. And you'd think I'd be doing enough of those that we wouldn't have these problems anymore, but it's okay. I always say you do not have to be perfect
That's
to be
right.
successful. So,
That's right. You just got to
um,
show up.
I know 90% of success is showing up. And I hope
Yes.
that the right people show up to this episode because this really could be a game changer for what we talk about in helping people decide whether they're in the very beginning stages or
Mm-hmm.
just kind of trying to piece the pieces back together, the broken pieces in their marriages and divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get started, actually tell us kind of the backstory of what got you into this industry and what makes you passionate about the work that you do.
So, as a kid, I always knew my family was dysfunctional.
Mm,
And I actually asked my mom at 11 years old, can we go to therapy? And she actually said yes.
really?
She did. And we went, and it gave me hope. And it made me realize, wow, you know what? Like, I love what these people are doing. And so, fast forward when I was 18, and I had the fantasy of everything's going to be better now that I leave my home and go to college.
Mm,
And that was not the case because I realized I had no life skill and I had no self-esteem. So
wow.
I started my journey a couple years later uh, with therapy, 12-step programs, and I had the hope that, oh my God, you know what? This can get better. And that's what I wanted to do with my life because it helped me so much.
Yeah. No, and I truly love the fact in the coaching world that, and I say this all the time, that we end up making careers out of the mess that we've
Yep,
been
that's
through.
right.
And we don't want other people to go through it. So we end up
No,
getting out there and going, okay, what can we do? What can I give the service
that's
or
right.
the advice? And so that's interesting. And so, um, kind of tell me have you done therapy right out of the
Mhm.
gate or you
I
have?
did. I did therapy for a long time, still go on and off. I think therapy is, at different points in your life, you tend to revisit it. But I just love the practicality. I mean, the other thing is you have to get a therapist that fits. And for
Right.
me, I just needed that practical support and tools to figure out how to live. And once I realized I was codependent, which was pretty obvious early on, even as a kid, I was an overgiver. So that's what made me want to focus on codependency because like you said, the codependent book no more, right? That's considered the Bible of
I know.
codependency. But there's so many different branches of how codependency impacts us.
Mhm.
My goal was to simplify the process for people so it's less intimidating because there is
Yeah.
a lot and it's hard to know where to start.
Well, so first of all, that's actually where we can start.
Hmm.
Explain to us what codependency is. What's like the best
Sure.
definition, and what are some of the signs that you can be like, oh yeah, I struggle with that.
So, codependency is when you focus so much on other people that you lose yourself in that process. So, you're the one that's overgiving, helping, the first one to volunteer. And it becomes, from that big heart. And we want to preserve that heart, but we need boundaries.
Mm,
So, because when we don't, and we're over giving and over functioning in relationships, we don't set boundaries. We say yes when we mean no. We tend to attract takers because if I'm over giving, right, the other person's going to go, oh, I don't really have to do a whole lot. She's going to take care of most of it. So we literally train people to do less. And that's kind of who we attract, people
yeah. What
with
would you say? I
problems.
mean, why do you think that we fall into that overgiving?
Hmm.
What's that? What's the symptom underneath it?
Yeah. Well, I think we don't have a strong sense of self and we're
Mhm.
looking for that external validation because a healthy person doesn't do that, right? We
Mhm.
we interview people to be in relationship with, but if they're not treating us right, we say I'm out. This isn't the
Mhm.
person for me. But the
Mhm.
codependent person goes, I need somebody to connect. I
Mhm.
need that band-aid in human form. So I'm not going to have real high standards because I don't want to be alone in my own skin. So it's really hard for the codependent because they're really emotionally starved. So their criteria for a relationship is way low, typically.
Does that typically come from somebody? I mean, I look back on my upbringing and I think when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I felt like I was abused and
Yeah.
it's so funny. I look back now, I'm like, I actually had a really pretty good life. So I'm
Hmm.
not sure where that began for me, at least, where I
Uh-huh.
was struggling with self-esteem and where I had to prove myself to others and overgive so
Yeah.
that I somehow felt valuable. So
Hmm.
typically, what are you seeing that what kind of upbringing do most
Hmm.
people come from that end up becoming
Yeah.
really highly codependent?
So usually there's some level of dysfunction in the family where there might be a parent who's depressed, not functioning well,
Mm,
addicted, codependent themselves. And let's face it, raising a kid is the hardest thing I think, I've ever done,
yeah.
especially when you're trying to do it in a healthy way where you have boundaries and you're not looking to your kid to satisfy your own needs.
Mhm.
So it's really important to figure out, what does that look like as we're in adulthood? Because when you're growing up with that level of dysfunction, you don't really get the self-esteem you want. So another thing is a lot of people grow up with parents who are there, but they're emotionally absent. They don't know how to emotionally affirm you or
Mhm.
validate your self-esteem. They might say, well, you got to get good grades because that's what we do. So you come home
Mhm.
with an A and they go, well, you didn't have an A plus, or, well,
Right.
I shouldn't have to, I've heard in some families where their birthdays weren't celebrated because
Mhm.
so there's so many areas in parenting where if you don't know how to validate and truly help your child develop into a whole person because you didn't know how to do that yourself,
Mhm.
then it's really hard to create a healthy child,
Right.
you
Yeah, and
know
I think it's hard. I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, first of all, it's hard to raise kids, right?
it is
And
hard.
and to model those yeah, to model those patterns. I mean, I look at it and go, man, I was really close to my dad. And my dad wasn't he had a mental illness
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, right? But I was his best little buddy.
Mhm.
And it was he kind of shaped the way that I saw the rest of my family, which are like, they don't understand you, Becky. And so
Right.
I became very isolated. I don't think he meant to do it that way. And,
Hmm.
but, but that's the thing is, I mean, I don't remember. I come from a really great family. We've had great experiences in my life. And I
Yeah.
still found myself, even as a teenager, being able to recognize that I just
Yeah.
really struggled with self-esteem, which then got me into a food addiction. So you
Yep.
talked about 12 step,
Me too.
right? Yeah. Yeah, because addiction is that's what we do is and actually, can you talk a little bit about that? Is that when you find some of these people, what's
Hmm.
the role of a codependent when it comes to addiction?
Well, we attract the people who are sometimes, either toxic or alcoholic or addict, because especially if you grow up with any level of addiction,
Mhm.
then that's familiar. So we tend to seek it out. But it's also that desire to fix. We
Mhm.
fall in love with the potential of who somebody is
Yep.
versus who they actually are, which is super dangerous emotionally because we think we know somebody when we really don't. And then 5 years down the line, we realize, you know what? I shouldn't have married him because
Mhm.
this isn't the person that I wanted to be with.
Yeah.
S-
I know that when I've been in I don't know how long you've been doing 12 step, but I've been doing it for 16, 17 years
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
And it always seems to me a pattern is there's an addict and there's a codependent, right? There's someone that's got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be that's got to be feeding or trying to control that addict. And when it's in a marriage, let's talk
Right.
a little bit about that. What does that look like, and what are some of the symptoms that people can be like, oh yeah, that's me?
So if you're trying to manage your spouse's life. You are
Mhm.
making excuses for them when they're drunk or hungover, or they can't go to work. You're doing the lion's share of the work, whether it's emotionally, practically in your family. You're doing all the raising of the kids because they're not functioning well, or you married someone who can't hold down a job because their addiction is in the way. I mean, there's a real one-sided, lopsidedness to these kind of marriages. But there's also that fantasy of, if only he would get sober or she would get sober, everything will be okay. And the reality is, in Al-Anon, they teach you, you know what? You do your side of the street. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can handle the marriage and stay in it, even though the person is actively using, because you're
Right.
not looking to them for your everything. You're creating your own life, while maybe you're making the choice to stay in the marriage until the kids are grown because that's your choice, or you're financially dependent. There's lots of reasons why people stay, which is why it's really important not to judge ourselves for not letting go.
Yeah, that kind of like what we talked about in the intro, right? Is
Yeah,
that sometimes we beat ourselves up over why did we stay so long?
right.
And in a relationship that, and I know that that's the case for so many, and I'm not here to say leave, go, stay, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
That's right.
that's a very, very individual
Hmm.
decision.
Right.
However, I do know for myself, as I was studying out of my second divorce, I started studying this because a lot of people use the word narcissistic, right? Or
Yeah.
those kind of tendencies. And I remember being so mad at people when I was doing coaching. Like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you like, everyone's a narcissist in your world? And that's just an excuse, until I actually experienced
Uh-huh.
a relationship where I thought I was going crazy,
Yeah.
and even at one point was suicidal because of
Mm.
it, which I have not shared that story. But that's what happens
Mhm.
when we're in these kind of relationships and we start really second guessing ourselves and then
Mhm.
beating
Right.
ourselves up over, look, I'm smarter than this. How did I find myself in this situation? Talk a little bit about that, where
Yeah.
it could be men or women that feel that way.
Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying is you were gaslit. And,
Mhm.
and this is a narcissistic trait, whether you have traits or the full-blown personality disorder, it doesn't matter. But they're really cunning at making you believe the sky is green, because
Mhm.
they will literally say that to you over and over. I wasn't yelling. I didn't say anything mean to you, when they literally just called you a name. But they're so straight faced, and they believe it to their core, that it's very hard to go into yourself and say, especially if you're codependent, because the first thing you're going to want to do is adapt what they think is reality, because they're so firm in it, versus, well, wait a minute, my gut's telling me, like, I know the sky is blue. I know they just called me a name. Like, that happened. But if we don't trust ourselves, which is really kind of the core of codependency, that self-doubt, we're going to think that other person's gaslighting has a grain of truth in it, when it doesn't. But that's why you need outside support.
I think something you just said was so important. They're not only confident, or they're not even secure in what they're
Hmm.
saying, they're confident. They
Oh,
actually
yeah.
believe what they're saying.
Yes. Yes.
And
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 they
I
have to.
yeah, well, yeah, they have. So explain to why do they have to believe that way?
Because the narcissist has no empathy for other people. And
Mhm.
that's why, the codependent, ironically, has the big heart. So they
Mhm.
can't understand, like, how are you not caring about my feelings? But they literally are not built that way. So asking them to care, asking them to consider your feelings, is just not going to happen. And that's really hard to wrap your head around emotionally, when you have a big heart and you're very your superpower is giving and empathy, because their superpower is, I'm going to survive myself, and everything I have to be right. That's their superpower, which is very toxic.
You know, Michelle, you made a really great point. I mean, you make a lot of great points, but you just made an important point that I want people to hear is that they think differently. Number one,
They do.
they think differently, and you
Yeah.
can't expect them to think like you are. They also are attracted to people who are like that, who are empathetic and
Yes.
who feel, because they don't.
Yes.
And they live vicariously through that. And actually they're quite
Hmm.
insecure. And so
Yeah.
they rely on, and so as I was studying through this, I was like, oh my gosh, because I wanted to know what the heck, how did I attract this person into my life? What's my part, right? After all those years in 12-step, I'm like, what's my part that I played a role in this? And I literally, I was like, oh, that's why he was attracted to me, because I do trust. People are very trusting with me. They trust me very quickly. I trust them very quickly. And that's not something he could do. And so he's like, I need that on my side. That's what I want. I want that that superpower, as you mentioned.
Right.
It's insane.
Well, and they're different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
They both need the other person to validate their self-worth. It's just the narcissist does it in a way that I have to be right. It's my way or the highway. You have to admire me. And the codependent is, let me do whatever I can to make sure you're happy so I can be happy. So they're happy to throw themselves under the bus, because that's what they're used to. And in childhood, it goes back to, I'm not going to need anything. My mom and dad thought I was being, too sensitive, too needy. So they learn really early on to be quiet and really hide their needs, which of course sets them up to attract a narcissist.
Okay, I know this is not a therapy session, but you just uncovered something for me.
Okay.
But I wonder, as a little girl, I was so precocious. I was so loquacious. I'm giving you all the crazy words. I was one of those kids that just had so much energy, and everyone kept telling me, Becky, calm down, go in the other room, go away, do this stuff. And so as an adult, I remember one time being on the phone, and my mom watches every single one of these episodes, so I know she's watching, but she called me one day, and I think this was after my first divorce, and it slipped that she's like, Becky, as a child, you were a burden. And I'm thinking, okay, if I'm a burden, then I need to become a pleaser.
Right. You have to make up for that.
Yeah. And so I think, this is one of the things that's so important, is to do the work to find out where they originally came from, these ideas that then cause our actions to get us into these relationships.
Right.
And look, do you find that people, what kind of work, I should say, do you suggest they do to really switch that script in their brain so that they start seeing the value that they bring?
So sometimes I have them think about the compliments they've received, because that can be a starting point of, you know what, I do matter. I do have gifts. But the first step in codependency recovery for me is to shift that focus away from external, right? Away from what you think of me versus what do I need? Like, if you wake up in the morning and you're constantly thinking about, what do I need to do for my family, my friends, my work, my church group? Like, instead of thinking that way, like, what would it be like to literally wake up in the morning and go, okay, what do I need to take care of myself today? Doesn't mean I'm not going to give, right? You're still, that superpower never goes away, even in recovery. I love that about myself. But I also know that if I don't take care of myself first, that giving is going to be followed by resentment. And that is going to poison my relationships. And that's what people need to realize, because that is just the hidden problem of resentment, because codependents are never going to admit that they're angry.
Well, of course, because we can't show that.
Right. We have to be nice.
Right. If we show that, then that shows that, that we're human and that we're not so flexible. Right. It's interesting, because one of the shirts I thought of making is, I'm patient until I'm not. Right.
Ooh, yeah.
And I realize that I think actually resentments is a really important thing to talk about too, because I think you said that the more they give and they have a secret resentment going, I don't ever receive, but you're afraid to express that I need something, because if I need something, I'm weak, or I'm a burden, or I'm not important, or, I'm going to be rejected, those kind of things.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the other things that happened during my divorce is that he said the very best thing, and you'll love this, because I think this is something that you can relate to, but you might be able to relate to. But one of the things that he did, he turned to me during our divorce proceedings, and he said straight to my face, and it was the best thing he could have ever said to me, because I think this woke me up from my codependency, is he looked at me and he says, Becky, I'm having a really hard time seeing the value that you bring to my life. And I was like,
Ooh,
wow. Well, so here's
wow.
the good news, Mr.
Right.
So-and-so.
Right. Right.
I said, I know the value. I had gotten to a
Mm.
point in my recovery that I was like, I know the value that I bring to your life. Whether or not you choose to see it or not is none of my business. And that
Good
was,
for you.
I know, that was probably the moment where I did start recovering from codependency and realizing that what I feel, what I think, what I'm experiencing, what I'm experiencing with this gaslighting thing is real. This is
Right.
real.
Right.
And my feelings do matter. And how hard do you how hard of a process is that when you're working with somebody to take them from like, oh, but it's all my fault. I'm the one that created this problem, and I'm going to take all the responsibility for all of this stuff, to when they get to that point of empowerment going, oh, wait a minute, I do matter.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a long process, because they need to be able to see their worth. And believe it or not, even though it makes sense, right? There can be a lot of resistance to that, because the familiar of what we grew up with, self-hate, beating ourselves up, taking responsibility for what isn't ours, that becomes our cushion, right? That becomes our blanket. So it's one thing to say, oh, well, you just need to feel better about yourself, but that is a process. But the one thing I will say that speeds up that process is, don't just consider doing an hour a week of therapy. Get into Al-Anon or CoDA. Find another support with codependency, because that, the way you said it, in terms of the progress with your ex-husband, that was because of your recovery. You didn't just do an hour a week. You went to meetings. You did the work. You did the work regularly so that you could get to that awareness level. And that's what I really want people to hear, is that an hour a week or reading a book by yourself, yeah, that's helpful. But having some form of regular group support is really key to me for making progress faster.
Well, and you said something even just a few minutes ago. My very first sponsor. So mine, I mean, I went to a couple different 12 steps for different reasons, because of, anyway, other relationships, right?
Yeah.
But but one of my very first sponsors said to me, when I would call her in a panic, she'd always say, Becky, she would just stop and she'd be like, what do you need to do to take care of yourself?
Yep, exactly. That's the one I asked too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I was like, that is the best, because it stopped me in my tracks. And it's like, my answers are right here. They're right here inside of me. And I don't have to look for somebody else or even a sponsor or anything. But I love that you bring up that, find a support there. And I know you mentioned CoDA, and you also mentioned Al-Anon. Can you just explain to people what that is? Because they very much deal with codependency.
So I tend to recommend Al-Anon first. That's the second program that was based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was for the spouses of people who drank too much. It's a 60-year-old program. You can find them online, in person, in every single country probably in the world. Whereas CoDA is much smaller, and they have a little bit different rules and guidelines. I mean, I think they follow the traditions, but they're a little more particular. And so I don't tend to recommend them as much, but some people prefer that. So it really depends on which one feels right to you, but it's free. They offer sponsors to help you work the steps in the program. And it's just a place to share what's happening without hearing any advice. I mean, that to me was so great. Because sometimes we just need to say, hey, I'm hurting and this sucks and I don't know what to do. And then everybody claps and says, keep coming back.
Yeah, keep coming back. We love you.
That's right.
And I truly believe that. I think some of those early on 12-step meetings, I still say, even my food program that I work is, I went through both of my divorces in it. I'm like, you guys saved my bacon,
Yep.
because there was times where I was coming and I was just crying
Yeah.
because I didn't know. Well, first of all, it's just very highly emotional, and to be able to have a safe space where you can go to where people aren't
Oh,
going to be like, "Becky,
yeah.
you should do this and this and this and this." No, it's just, this is
That's
where I'm
right.
at, and this is how I feel.
Right.
And if people haven't, and people have a misconception about 12-step, thinking that you have to be
Yes,
some
they
drug
do.
addict to be in there. And that is
Yeah.
not the case.
No.
It's not.
Or it's a religious program, and it's not.
Yeah.
We have atheists and agnostics come in and say, I want no part of God. Thank you very much. And we welcome you anyway, because
Yeah.
eventually you'll find your own. But
Yeah.
even if you don't, you're not going to get kicked out for your own personal beliefs.
Yeah. And it is a beautiful, I mean, I know it saved my life. It
Yeah, me too.
absolutely saved my life. And I remember it was so funny because during my second divorce, my former was being deposed, right? A deposition. And something that he said in there, he's like, yeah, Becky's addiction, her food addiction is just, it was ruining our marriage. And I was like, I was never in my addiction.
Right.
Recovery was a threat to you.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because I was in full blown recovery at that point. And it's interesting to be in these kind of relationships. And I know that when people come to you, do you work nationwide or are you just in California?
I'm in California, but I've just started branching out into some coaching. I'm going to probably start offering that too, because I get a lot of responses for that.
Yeah. So you basically talk about what you do for people when they come to you, and what's that process? What does that look like? And who would be the perfect right fit person to contact you?
So for me, it's either the person who is struggling with codependency or low self-esteem in their relationships. And I start where they start. We all have the motivating factor, right? Whether it's I am losing my relationship, I don't have a relationship, whatever that is, because nobody's going to do what we should do in recovery. We're going to do where the pain is. That the pain is the wake-up call. So
Right.
I start where they're at. I usually have a lot of practical skills, like how would you shift the focus off of them back onto you? Would you be willing to start Al-Anon? Let's start assessing your relationships. I have a free tool on my website that literally talks about what are some toxic traits? What are some relationship behaviors of yourself that you need to identify? Because we all know when a relationship isn't working, but to really see it, like, oh my God, like I did it, like I created the tool and then I did it myself. And I was surprised. I learned that, wow, some of the friends that I didn't think much of were really way healthy. And then I saw some of my relationship members with my family. I thought, ooh, I need to work on some of those, because those are still borderlining. So, knowing what's healthy behavior for you, because we can't change everybody else, but I've seen more people make small tweaks in themselves, and even when the other person's toxic, it actually still helps it, because the other person says, well, wait a minute, they're actually not beating me up. They're not blaming me. They're not making me feel bad. So I'm more apt to come to the table and be healthy as well, even though they don't do the work. So it can translate into a healthy relationship depending on, the level of toxicity the person has.
Well, and I think one of the things too to remember, and you just said it, is that we may not in the relationship may not recognize what's healthy, what's not healthy.
Right.
We may not recognize what boundaries we haven't been holding, or we say this is a boundary.
Right.
I have a friend of mine that puts down a boundary and then it still keeps happening. I'm like, it's not a boundary.
So, well, right. It's a request. And the boundary
request
comes from the reaction. Like if somebody says, no, I'm not going to stop drinking. I don't care what you tell me. Great. That's the boundary, is what are you going to do now?
Exactly.
Are you going to stay in relationship with them, or are you going to go, you know what? Maybe I'm going to have less expectation and not have that person in my inner circle because they drink too much and it affects our connection,
Right.
But
And what would you say to somebody that is kind of in that place of like trying to get the courage up to
Mm.
to leave when this has been going on for
Yeah.
years and they just are stuck and they aren't able
Yeah.
to make that decision yet.
Get support. I
Mm,
would absolutely say, if you can start recovery, that's going to help you, one, talk it out so you can
mhm,
go to meetings and literally say, I can't let go yet. I mean, I know so many women who were 95% out of the marriage, and then it took 3 to 5 years to get to the 100%. That
mm.
last 5% took a long time, but that we can't judge that
I
because
know. I know.
based on our childhood, there's reasons why we're not letting go.
Yeah.
We're scaring ourselves, that false evidence appearing real. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but if you can get the support you need now, eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember one of my best friends during my first divorce said to me,
Mhm.
when there was so much pressure from so many people, Becky, don't you see the writing on the wall? And, and I just
Yeah.
was not ready. I just
Right.
couldn't do it.
Right.
And she said to me, she goes, you do not need to make a decision today. Your
Yeah.
clarity will come when it's going to come and you will know, and it will be so clear.
Mm.
And it was
Mhm.
only a few
Yeah.
weeks after that something said, someone said something to me, and that was it. My clarity, I was done.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's just, I had to trust the process because it's
Mhm.
going to be, and sometimes that decision is made for you. Something
Right.
big
That's true.
happens, right?
That's true.
I was even mentioning to a friend of mine today that I also, during the second divorce, I would pray and say, God, please open up this opportunity to have this
Yes.
conversation. And when it's the right time. And
Mhm.
sometimes it took a couple weeks for that opportunity, but for me to recognize the opportunity and then
Mhm.
have the courage to say and do
Mhm.
what I needed to at
Yeah.
that very moment. And it is hard, but you know what, on the other side and being
Yeah.
out of those relationships, it's
Mhm.
been a game changer. And I know, but everybody's journey is an individual journey for themselves.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
man, I so appreciate that this is kind of where your specialty is and where you help people see that. And I'd love to hear that you're in 12 step. I love it.
Oh yeah.
I do,
I promote it all the time.
I do too. I mean, when I got into 12 step, people were just going, will you just shut up? And I'm like, oh my gosh, but food doesn't call out my name anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm
Right.
free
That's a
from
big
all of
deal.
this stuff that I've dealt with in my whole life. And it's a beautiful, even this morning when I was doing my writing, in my recovery, we do a question a day.
Uh-huh.
As I was doing that, it says, do you really care what other people think of you? And I'm so
Mm.
grateful in my answer to be like, I really have gotten to the point where it's like, I don't care. And it doesn't mean but yes, isn't that huge?
That's
It's,
huge.
it's like, I know. But had my ex-husband not said that to me, that comment, I wouldn't have
Right.
been able to
Right.
see it for myself
Right.
to go, wow, you really are valuable.
Right.
And that's probably when I get guests on other people's podcasts, when they usually like to ask me that last question, I'm like, my biggest message to everyone is that you matter. Your
Right.
voice matters, your heart matters, your
Mhm.
intentions, your empathy, your love, your
Mhm.
desires, all of it matters.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to matter to anybody else but you. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
Because that's how important you are. We're a little tiny speck in the universe, but we're that important. As my girlfriend says, you're kind of a big deal.
I love it.
And it's hard to get there. You're going, I really am. And it's not in an egotistical way.
Right.
I
Well,
love it.
I think that's where codependent people get confused. They think self-esteem means arrogance,
Yep.
but it's not.
No.
You are equal to everyone else. You're not better than or less than,
Right.
but you're important and you're special and you're unique. And that's what we need to celebrate.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And Michelle, where did you say you have a free download on your site? I put your website at the very bottom.
I do. I
Tell us
have
a little bit about it.
the 7 steps to healing one-sided relationships. And that's going to
Mhm.
help you shift that focus back to
Mhm.
yourself and just do little things that are going to help you recalibrate that relationship
Mhm.
because you're going to show up differently. Because again, we don't need the other person to get
Yep.
into therapy. Sure, we'd love it, but that sometimes doesn't happen. But
Mhm.
you can still make small but steady changes to start shifting the dynamic yourself.
Yeah, I love it. And they can find it at your website. That's right there,
Yep.
counselingrecovery.com.
Yes.
Lovely. I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on today and sharing your
Thank
wisdom.
you.
And I hope people reach out to you and are able to be able to work with you and get advice from you. I do also love to finish my podcast with one question. And the question is what does divorcing strong mean to you?
That means that you're divorcing in an authentic way that honors who you are and how you show up. So it doesn't matter how they're showing up. You can still show up as being light and polite, being respectful, being who you are. And that to me is divorcing strong.
Oh, I love it. I really think that's so true. I love that you said authentic. Because I don't know why it's so hard, especially for someone like myself, to have a whole lifetime. It takes a lifetime to be okay.
And it's easy to match toxic behavior with toxic behavior.
Yes.
So it's much harder to go, no, I'm not going to play that. I'm going to stick to my side of the street and be respectful.
Yeah, and just be comfortable in our own skin.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. Codependent No More and counselingrecovery.com. Reach out to Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, again for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hold on just one sec. Thank you, everybody, for another episode of Divorcing Strong podcast. I've been your host, Becky Sampson, with Michelle Farris. Oh, my goodness. We could talk forever about this. I can tell you right now, I could bring her on in another episode because there's so much to this unraveling when you've been in a toxic relationship. And really, that codependency starts with us. We are part of that equation. And I'm going to say we and me, because I've experienced this in multiple relationships in my life. And I keep having these awakening moments going, oh, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. And here's the good news. It usually happens to very authentic, beautiful, empathetic, sincere and genuine people. But once you can see the signals and once you can see the signs, then you can change it. You can literally change it and start taking back your power. And so thank you. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also send this to people that you know that would need it. Also find us on all the audio platforms. We'd love to have you join us with Divorcing Strong. And one last thing is make sure you download your free download. This is for anyone going through divorce that needs to understand the legal jargon, the legal terminology in the court system, because the more educated you are, the better you're going to navigate these waters of the legal system. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.